I'm Malcolm Wallaker, the go-to agent in northern Minnesota, and this is the top 5 things you need to see in Minnesota. I'm out here with my dog Zeke, going for a little walk here. We just had a newborn baby, and apparently I have a pretty loud voice. So my wife sent me out if I wanted to do any type of filming today. So I'm here with Zeke. So we're gonna talk about the top 5 places to see if you're gonna move to Minnesota. Number 1 is Duluth. Now, I had never gone to Duluth until I moved up to the northern half of Minnesota. It's full of breweries, restaurants to eat. You're right next to the North Shore. Me and my wife have spent lots of time there. Number 2 is the Boundary Waters. The Boundary Waters was a different experience for somebody that grew up in a city. Growing up in Rochester, Minnesota, being a city kid, not really growing up in the outdoors, the Boundary Waters actually was quite the awakening for me. I had gone to the Boundary Waters about a year ago with a group of guys. We had used an outfitter that brought us to a van. We used this outfitter that took us deep into the wild with a van, and I remember too just that feeling of being, wow, this is really happening, when they dropped us off with nothing but backpacks and canoes. That first night was rough when I realized I had no cell phone service. I had no way of communicating with my wife or anything like that. And that night I was so anxious when I got to the Boundary Waters. I was afraid of things like dehydration, and I looked up all these things of what I had to do to stay positive or stay healthy, and to stay healthy. Come on, Zeke. One of the biggest things I was told is to stay hydrated. So I probably drank at least 2 gallons of water that day. So I drank 2 gallons of water that day, trying to stay hydrated. And that evening I realized that I was drinking water and using the restroom all the time, and I hadn't eaten a whole lot, and I hadn't been consuming any salt or anything like that. So later that night in the tent, I couldn't stop shaking. Turns out I had drinking so much water that all my electrolytes were gone, and I was suffering from dehydration. All I had to do was drink a couple Powerades and I was fine. If you love being out in nature, the Boundary Waters is definitely the place for you. The 3rd place you need to travel to when you move to Minnesota is the Twin Cities. This one may seem a little obvious, but if you're from the northern part of the state, sometimes people like to avoid that. But if you're living in the cities, you are never gonna run out of things to do. Up just about an hour and a half from there, I remember going to Twins games, Viking games, Wild games, Timberwolf games, all things like that. Even when I was a college student living in the cities, there was plenty to do living on a budget. We would go to improv theater, we would go to cheap restaurants, and there was always a dollar theater nearby. The number 4 place to visit Minnesota has a near and dear place to my heart, because I actually proposed to my wife and went on this trip for our honeymoon, and that is up the North Shore. There are multiple state parks to visit up the North Shore, multiple hiking trails, great places to eat. It's a great place to visit. It's not too far from Duluth, where a city kid like me can get his fix in. And the number 5 place to visit in Minnesota, maybe a little biased of me, but is the Great Lakes area of northern Minnesota, right around the Iron Range, Brainerd area. This area is near and dear to my heart for a couple of reasons. For one, I went to camp here at Big Sandy Camp, just about 45 minutes to an hour away here growing up, and loved every second of it. Winter camp, learning to play broom ball for the first time, just enjoying the northern Minnesota winter for the first time, which is something you definitely have to get used to. Second is I moved up here after I met my wife. This was a big compromise I had thought at the time, because growing up in a town of 120,000 people of Rochester, Minnesota, I had thought that I was crazy to move to such a secluded area. Little did I know that I'd fall in love with it and be just fine living here. And third has to be the outdoors here in northern Minnesota. I didn't grow up with a lot of things that northern Minnesota has to provide, and I didn't know what I was missing. In the time that I've lived in northern Minnesota, I have had multiple experiences. This past year, I actually got my first deer. Some people would say that I shot Bambi, but that's beside the point. Fishing here is incredible. I actually went sturgeon fishing for the first time a couple years back. I caught this, what I thought was this huge fish. It had to be at least 2 feet long, thinking that I had caught some sort of record. Turns out that was just a baby. Couldn't believe it. And the last thing that I had learned that people like to do outdoors here is blow things up. We have a men's retreat. We have a men's retreat with my church every year, and I remember the very first year we had used tannerite. I think we blew up a car or something with 30 pounds of it, and it just exploded. This past year we actually blew up a refrigerator with 24 pounds of tannerite. I'll post a video, a link below to check that out in slow motion. Just a great time. There's just things that people always find things to do up here. It's a unique place. I'm happy to be here, and I highly recommend you check out all parts of the state, whether you live here or just visiting. If you're interested in more content similar to this, please subscribe below, check out my socials, and if you're interested in moving here, all that information is below. I'm Malcolm Walker, the go-to agent in northern Minnesota. Thanks for watching.